Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry to interrupt that wonderful music, but I'm delighted to welcome you to this evening's presentation by our special guest, Celia Stahr, who will speak to us about her book, Frida in America, which was such an important resource for all of us at the Frick as we prepared our two exhibitions about Frida Kahlo, masterfully curated by my colleague, Melanie Groves, whom you'll meet in just a moment. I wanted to give a particular thank you to the Frick Societies, the group of leadership donors who are so invested in our mission. They make possible everything we do, including bringing signature programs such as tonight's lecture to you free of charge. We hope you love it. We hope we'll see much of you at other virtual events. And of course, we hope you'll visit the exhibitions, which are on view currently 5 days a week and about to expand once we reach the month of April to 6 days a week. There's so much for you to see. We'd love to welcome you to campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Viscusi. I'm the manager of adult learning here at the Frick, and I'm so delighted to welcome Celia Stahr. Hi, Celia. And I'm also, you're seeing our ASL interpreter, Nick. He is here. He's going to be with us this evening, so thanks for being with us, Nick. And welcome. We're seeing some of you still pour in. That's a great news. I want to give you a few pointers quickly. We have closed captions, and if you want to toggle your button on, it should be at the bottom of your screen. Some people have it at the top or the side, but there is a CC live transcript button you're able to push. Again, we have Nick here for you. And as Lizzie said, we have our incredible Frida exhibitions open until May 30th. We have our Vicente Wolf collection that he has lent us, curated by my colleague Melanie, and a Nicholas Marai mini pop-up exhibit as well that is sort of a great, beautiful punctuation of the exhibition in our galleries. And I encourage you also to join us. We have a very furtive spring of programs. Yes, I said it. Coming up, we have a few Frida-related programs coming up, as well as some excellent programs about the night sky, birds, and also upcoming programs related to our new exhibition by local citizen artist Vanessa German. And we encourage you to come and see both the Frida exhibition, Vanessa's exhibition, and just visit us. We are open safely, and we look forward to seeing you and seeing everyone very soon. I'm just going to say a few words about Celia, and then we will get into her author talk, which I'm very excited for. Oh, and also, you are welcome to use the chat function on your screen if you have any questions, logistical questions. We are going to have a Q&A at the end, so you can save your questions for the end. But again, if you need to communicate with us during the program, you're welcome to use the chat function. You can send it just to myself, Lisa Viscusi. Hello, everyone. Someone said hello. Hi. And so with that, Celia Stahr teaches art history at the University of San Francisco, where she specializes in modern, contemporary, and African art with an emphasis on issues of gender, race, ethnicity, and cross-cultural mixing. And her book, this beautiful book we have, is for sale in our museum store and on display behind her, as you can see. It recently came out in 2020, so we're getting her when it's fresh and exciting. It's always going to be exciting. But Celia, it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I'm really, really looking forward to having you with us today, as is everyone else. So I'm going to turn it over to Celia. She's going to share her screen, and enjoy, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I'm so excited to be able to speak today and tonight. It's today on the West Coast, tonight on the East Coast, in relationship to your exhibition. I'm also, really honored to be able to present a talk today on Frida Kahlo because it is the last day of Women's History Month and it's International Transgender Day of Visibility. Frida, I'm sure, is smiling right now. Frida Kahlo knew how to pose for the camera. As the daughter of a professional photographer, she'd been the subject of his family photos since she was 3 years old. Posing was natural. It was akin to going to church every Sunday. It was just something Frida and her family did on a regular basis. When Frida became a teenager, she learned how to best pose to camouflage her slightly shorter and thinner right leg due to polio by placing it behind her left leg, as seen on the left and in the center. She also learned how to use her intense facial expressions to draw attention to her emotions. And she learned how to make herself look androgynous. While some middle-class Mexican fathers might have scorned their daughter's eccentric ways, Guillermo Kahlo identified with his daughter's simultaneous desire to shake things up and find her place in the world. For Guillermo, this dual desire manifested when he was 19 years old and was forced to abandon his plans of entering the university in Nuremberg, Germany, due to a bad fall that left him with a brain injury, producing epileptic seizures. He sank further into despair when his mother died shortly thereafter. It didn't help that his father, Jakob Kahlo, remarried a woman he disliked. To ease tensions, Jakob Kahlo gave his son enough money for passage on a steamliner bound for Mexico. In 1891, he left the old country as Wilhelm and entered his new country as Guillermo. He eventually found a job and met Matilde Calderon y Gonzalez, and the couple married in 1898, eventually having 4 daughters, Matilde, Adriana, Frida, and Cristina. Guillermo became a professional photographer, setting up his own studio in Mexico City. He specialized in architecture, landscapes, and factories. He avoided portraits, if at all possible, because as he dryly quipped, quote, he did not wish to improve upon what God had made ugly, end quote. At home in Coyoacán, however, it was a different story. Guillermo liked to set up photo shoots in the courtyard of the family's house. He was fastidious about his backdrops and the photographic process. In this way, he displayed the attributes of a serious professional photographer. But when it came to photographing Frida and her various guises, he exhibited a creative openness. When his 18-year-old daughter showed up in a man's suit for a family portrait, he didn't make her change. In fact, according to the note Frida wrote on her copy of the photo, she was wearing her father's suit. Did anyone in this middle-class Catholic family object? If they did, there's no record of it. But look at this photograph. Frida's presence dominates. She's the sole standing figure with her arm draped over her uncle as if to convey dominance. And there's that strong gaze. On this same day, February 7th, 1926, Guillermo took another photo of his daughter. Now Frida is alone, she's seated, and she wears a dress. It's a very different persona that father and daughter are acting out for the camera. Frida looks straight out with her penetrating gaze, making it clear she's a thinker. The books in her lap underscore this as well. One has an intriguing design on the cover, as does Frida's dress with its abstract curvilinear double emblem. Now, while it may be impossible to decipher the symbols on Frida's dress and book, what is clear is that Frida was photographed on the same day wearing both men's clothing and women's clothing, emphasizing her a self-acknowledged nervous man who struggled to find a sense of inner peace. He had created numerous personas through his photographic self-portraits while in his 20s and 30s. He sometimes appears as the bohemian artist with a cigarette or the dapper photographer wearing a suit and a slight smile as he holds onto his large camera propped up on a tripod. Clearly, one thing Frida learned from her father was how to engage viewers with an intense stare, as seen here and here. Frida began to use her powerful gaze in her paintings, as seen here in Self-Portrait in a Velvet Dress. It's really her first painted self-portrait, and she incorporates many of the elements she will continue to utilize in her painted self-portraits: the engaging stare and the androgynous look. In this case, a dress combined with a short cropped hairstyle and a unibrow. By 1928, Frida's androgynous look would be more pronounced, as seen here in the center of Diego Rivera's mural, Distribution of Arms, at Mexico City's Ministry of Education. After joining a group of politically active artists centered around Italian-American photographer Tina Modotti, seen right here on the far right, Frida met and fell in love with Rivera, one of the most powerful and well-known artists in Mexico. Frida saw herself as an artist for the people. And here we see her in a photograph that was taken as she's participating in a march for workers' rights on May Day in 1929. Now, by August of 1929, just 5 months later, Frida Kahlo married Diego Rivera. And as you can see in this photograph, her persona began to shift from the androgynous worker into the indigenous woman artist of the people. In this self-portrait, Time Flies, on the left, created shortly after the couple married, Frida wears a white peasant-style shirt with an Aztec necklace. She retains the unibrow from her first self-portrait and the short hair. Only here, it looks as if her hair is pulled back in braids in a similar fashion to the photo on the right. Her eyes in the painting are front and center, but rather than looking out toward the viewer, they appear as if looking inward. She stands in an interior with green curtains, a motif borrowed from Mexican colonial style paintings seen here in Bustos's work. Sorry. There we go. However, the airplane flying outside in Frida Kahlo's work is a modern addition. And this is something that other modern artists like Bess Mogar were incorporating into their paintings. In the end, Frida combines a mixture of Mexican colonial style, indigenous, and modern. These hybrid elements came to represent Mexicanidad, which in the post-revolutionary period was understood as a redefinition of what it meant to be Mexican. For Frida, her art, as well as her style of dress, were expressions of Mexicanidad and the valorization of a traditional Indian way of life. This was a shift from the pre-revolutionary days when indigenous people were caricatured as dirty, unsophisticated, hunched over, and blank-eyed. In 1930, Frida took her new persona to the United States, a country she was both wary of and curious about due to the often fraught relationship between these countries that share a border. She and Diego would spend 3 years from 1930 to 1933 with Diego painting murals in San Francisco, Detroit, and New York. Their first stop was San Francisco. Frida at 23 was a budding artist. Her husband at 44 was a well-established painter at the height of his career. The couple lived in Diego's artistic world, surrounded by his friends and art patrons. Frida could have easily been overshadowed by her husband's larger-than-life personality and fame, but instead she turned heads with her unique look, her wit, her intelligence, and her creative talents. When both Edward Weston and Imogene Cunningham wanted to photograph Frida, she had an opportunity to project her new persona for the cameras of professional photographers. Weston's photo shoot occurred on a cool December day, a few weeks after Frida had arrived in San Francisco. Weston made the short trip from Carmel to San Francisco to see his friend Diego and meet his new wife. When he saw Frida in her ethnic attire, her dark hair pulled back to showcase her striking features, he was transfixed, saying, "She is quite beautiful and shows little of her father's German blood," end quote. Weston knew a good photographic subject when he saw one and began taking some black and white pictures of her. She wears a full-length dress, a European-style narrow silk shawl with fringe, 3 large jadeite Aztec beaded necklaces, and dangling metal earrings with a floral design, seen here in this close-up. The photo makes clear that Frida is a thoughtful woman who is aligned with the indigenous people of Mexico. In Mexico, after the revolution, this type of fashion visually conveyed a middle-class woman's solidarity with the indigenous people, an act that ran deeper than mere aesthetics. Quote, "To be truly Mexican, one was expected to be part Indian or to demonstrate a concern for the valorization and redemption of the Mexican Indian as part of the nation," end quote, says historian Rick Lopez. However, by 1930, 10 years after the end of the revolution, Anglo tastes were at the height of fashion for women of Frida's class in Mexico. Therefore, Frida's style of dress in Mexico conveyed her support for the indigenous people at a time when many middle-class women were wearing the Anglo styles of the 1930s, making Frida's style of dress stand out even more. In the United States, the political implications of Frida's dress were probably lost on casual onlookers, but the artists and art patrons who got to know Frida would have had a greater appreciation for what she was conveying with her style of dress. For example, Edward Weston, who had lived in 1920s Mexico among artists and who was photographing the country and people, certainly had a deeper understanding for Frida's style of dress, unlike the people in the Montgomery Street neighborhood in San Francisco who stopped to admire her outfit. Huaraches peeking out from under a long, undulating skirt with a golden, turquoise, and yellow silk shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Even in this bohemian section of San Francisco, the sight of this unknown Mexican woman created a, quote, excitement, as Weston marveled. According to photographer Imogene Cunningham, Frida also, quote, stopped the traffic with her beautiful outfits, end quote. When Frida posed for Cunningham, she chose a different outfit to wear, including her rebozo, or shawl. It's made out of a lighter weight rayon, and it was associated with women of the lower classes. While Cunningham felt that her large Graflex camera was too bulky and awkward to put people at ease, Frida was an experienced model, and her ease comes through. Perhaps it was also the fact that Cunningham liked Frida, saying that she found her, quote, charming, sweet, and talented. She was intrigued by this, quote, beautifully dressed woman. In an interview from the early 1970s, Cunningham recalled, quote, "She had trunks and trunks of clothes, and they were all exactly alike, except for color. They were all big, wide peasant skirts and a rebozo and tons of jewelry. And then she braided ribbons in her hair, and she was really lovely. And I think, this is a terrible thing to say, that she was a better painter than Diego. She never got any credit. This is the second-class status of women," end quote. While Frida did garner some attention for her art while in San Francisco, posing for Cunningham provided her with the opportunity to represent Mexican women through the photographic image. We see Frida here sitting up high with her arm resting on the back of a wicker chair, staring directly into the camera with those captivating eyes. She looks as if she's in conversation with us. But what is she trying to communicate? The key to Frida's message comes through her outfit and jewelry. They can be read like a text. As in Weston's photos, she wears distinctive jewelry. But this time, her long metal earrings are round Aztec battle shields with dangling stylized feathers. Aztec warriors, as seen in the image on the right, acquired wooden shields with various painted designs based upon their rank and feats of bravery. In the middle of Frida's metal shield earrings is an abstracted plumed serpent known as Quetzalcoatl, that ancient Mesoamerican deity, which was so important for the Aztecs. They were drawn to Quetzalcoatl's twin nature. It was a plumed serpent. And so therefore the feminine sphere of the earth was represented by the serpent, and the masculine sphere of the sky represented by the feathers. And so once again, though in a more subtle manner, Frida emphasizes the balancing of male and female, or androgyny, something that was also important for the Aztecs. Now, Frida's Aztec shield earrings complement her Aztec necklace. And this is the same necklace she wore in self-portrait Time Flies. In Cunningham's photograph, however, Frida pairs the Aztec necklace and warrior shield earrings with a rebozo that is strewn over her shoulder, creating the look of revolutionary female soldiers or soldaderas who wore bullet-filled bandoliers crossed in front. Sometimes, when not in uniform, the soldaderas wore their rebozos crossed in front to distinguish themselves as soldiers. Frida identified with the soldaderas, who were known for their strength and tenacity. When some women were belittled and even rejected for their desire to join the revolutionary troops, they fought back by wearing men's clothing and passing as males. The soldaderas weren't just an anomaly. They played a crucial role in the revolution. Their fame grew in Mexico as the popular corrido or revolutionary song La Adelita, about a soldadera who fought for Francisco Madero's troops, came to symbolize the revolutionary spirit. After the revolution, the name Adelita became synonymous with any woman who fought for her rights. Frida loved belting out this corrido dedicated to strong Mexican women. At a Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, consuming the food from home, Frida's soul was fired up, and out came La Adelita. She proudly recalled to her mother, quote, "I was a hit." Frida, with her crossed rebozo, understood that by arranging her shawl in a similar fashion to the soldaderas and wearing jewelry recalling the fierce Aztec warriors, she evoked the persona of the politically engaged nationalist. For Frida, who was still coming into her own, that identity was bound up with the image of the strong, independent, and at times cross-dressing Adelita, a persona her mother had modeled for her in a photograph seen here on the left. Prior to her parents' marriage, Frida's father took a photo of then 21-year-old Matilde dressed as a soldadera. She stands barefoot, hands on hips, wearing a long peasant-style skirt, white short-sleeve blouse, crossed rebozo, and jewelry, with flowers and ribbons adorning her two long braids. The fake backdrop behind her of a snow-covered scene with alpine trees and a Swiss chalet makes it clear she's playing a role. Nevertheless, this image, part of Frida's vast photo collection, must have meant a lot to the daughter, who was proud that her mother had helped the revolutionaries by feeding them and tending to their wounds. As a public figure in the United States, Frida had the potential to influence people's perceptions of Mexican women, something that was really important at this time during the economic depression, when there was a strong anti-immigrant feeling. In these early years, she was continually manipulating aspects of the indigenous Mexican woman's persona, but always highlighting a mixture of intelligence, strength, sometimes androgyny, and beauty. She felt good about these photos, informing her mother, quote, "I had some wonderful pictures taken of me. As soon as I have copies, I will send them to you," end quote. Just as Frida was experimenting with her persona through the photographic image, she was also exploring the creative possibilities of painted self-portraits. And here we see one that she created in San Francisco, where she's standing alongside Diego. In this painting called Frida and Diego Rivera, created in the Mexican popular painting style of Estrada, with its plain background wall, inscription, and its attention to detail, Frida conveys some important differences between husband and wife. Diego stands tall, his feet firmly planted on the ground, with his brushes and palette in hand, next to Frida, who tilts her head toward her husband, as if to convey her deference to the maestro. Now, most authors see the painting as an example of Frida as the wife to larger-than-life muralist. It was surmised that Frida didn't see herself as an artist at this early stage, but details matter when it comes to Frida's art. In terms of color, Frida's vibrant red rebozo hugging her shoulders and hanging down in front of her green dress really stands out. It catches the eye, drawing our attention to this Mexican woman who we learn from the banner above is the artist who created this painting for Albert Bender, one of the most important art patrons in the Bay Area. It was a smart move on Frida's part, as he loaned it to many exhibitions until 1935, when he donated it to the newly created San Francisco Museum of Art, now SF MoMA. The fact that Frida made this painting for Bender and placed the information in the ribbon above indicates that Frida was more ambitious than most people have surmised. Letters that Frida wrote home to family and friends support this idea that Frida was ambitious. She wrote to her mother on December 4th, 1930, less than 1 month after arriving, "I am painting because they want me to have an exhibition before we go. It's a good opportunity for me to sell some things. We will probably move to a hotel so I can paint all day instead of spending my time sweeping floors and stupid stuff like that," end quote. 3 weeks later, Frida told her mother, quote, "I'm painting quite a lot, almost all day long," end quote. Now, while Frida's marriage portrait may seem to some to be a statement of her subordinate role within her marriage, if we look at an earlier drawing she made when she first arrived in San Francisco, and we look more closely at the placement of Frida's hand in her painting, the issue of power begins to shift. In the drawing, Frida's hand is submerged under Diego's. In the painting, Frida's hand is on top. She has more control. This hand gesture, in conjunction with her choice of colors, words in the banner above, and clothing and jewelry, are significant. In this painting, Frida not only foregrounds her persona as the Mexican woman who is in solidarity with indigenous women and the lower classes, but in a more subtle fashion, she conveys through the use of a popular style of painting and her rebozo that she is an artist for the Mexican people as well. By the time Frida was in Detroit 1 year later, she changed her outfit, dropped the presence of her husband, and placed herself on a border marker between Mexico and the United States. In this painting, Self-Portrait on the Borderline, between Mexico and the United States, we see a complex painting with a lot of imagery to absorb. A smoke-belching Ford factory, high rises and machines occupying the right side, and the ruins of a pyramid, a crumbling wall, a skull, 2 ceramic figurines, flowers and cacti occupying the left. In the middle, on a border marker, stands Frida with perfect posture. She wears a colonial style floor-length pastel pink dress with fitted bodice. While it's easy to get lost in all the images in this painting, once again, details matter. This proper-looking young woman becomes a provocateur when you notice her tight-fitting bodice and nipples. Her obvious bralessness would have raised eyebrows among the Detroit area's upper crust. But Frida doesn't look ashamed. She stands tall as an independent Mexican woman, symbolized by the lit cigarette in one hand and the paper Mexican flag in the other. A significant image given the anti-Mexican rhetoric and governmental actions in the United States in 1932, with repatriation taking place. But what we see here is Frida, right, standing tall as a mestiza, a woman of mixed ethnicities, wearing a colonial style dress and a beaded necklace bearing the colors of the Mexican flag. It's a hybrid outfit, and it's appropriate, as scholar Gloria Anzaldúa observes, quote, "The Mexico-United States border is a site where many different cultures touch each other, and the permeable, flexible, and ambiguous shifting grounds lend themselves to hybrid images," end quote. Frida plays up her hybridity through her outfit and her connection to both sides of the border. She also plays up her strong gaze, something she had been perfecting as an adolescent, seen here on the left in this photograph, but had modified in her painted image next to her husband as her gaze was less outward focused and more inward focused. Yet when we get to self-portrait on the borderline, Frida's strong gaze is beginning to reemerge in her paintings, becoming stronger with this self-portrait from 1933, created in Detroit and finished in New York. Once again, Frida has been thinking about Estrada's Mexican style of painting, but she zooms in and makes her face the focus. And what do we see? Thick black eyebrows that touch each other, appearing bird-like and framing her strong gaze. As well, we see the black hairs above her lip, emphasizing a mustache. She is both beautiful and thoughtful, quote unquote feminine and quote unquote masculine, and empowered. Yet, just 1 year earlier, Frida had painted herself as a vulnerable woman. It's quite a different image. She is showing herself in the throes of a miscarriage. She's nude, recumbent on a bed, bleeding and crying, her body contorted. In 1933, she was ready to get up out of the bed and project an image of strength. But in this same year of 1933, she also creates My Dress Hangs There. And now, instead of a strong face, a strong gaze, even a body, we are left with a dress. And of course, the title is My Dress Hangs There. So what's happened to that iconic Frida Kahlo gaze? To understand a bit about the significance of Frida placing her dress in the center of this painting, we have to know a bit about what's going on in this political painting that's centered in the Wall Street area with Federal Hall, a statue of George Washington, a graph showing the weekly sales in millions, Trinity Church, and a billboard of Mae West making up the back part of the painting. In the foreground, Frida collaged images of people taken from newspapers waiting in bread lines for food and holding up signs protesting lost jobs, unfair wages, and racial discrimination. One sign reads, "Negro and white dressmaker on the picket lines," conveying the solidarity between Black and white dressmakers. The dressmaker on the picket lines, of course, takes on significance when you realize that Frida has placed her dress front and center. In fact, many of the protesters walk underneath her dress as if it's watching over them. Now, originally, Frida had placed a simple dress above, like the one that you see in this photo of Frida on the left, as if to symbolize the New York City dressmakers. Or perhaps she was also thinking about the laundry that typically hung from windows in Lower Manhattan where she was living. However, by the time she finished the painting, while back in Mexico several years later, around 1938, she had replaced the plain dress with a dress worn by the Tehuana women of Tehuantepec in Oaxaca, the style of clothing she was now donning herself. These women from Tehuantepec were known as strong and independent. They were the ones who controlled the marketplace. And Frida has placed her Tehuana dress in the Wall Street area of Manhattan. Why did Frida hang her dress here instead of placing a self-portrait? Frida doesn't provide any clear answers, but perhaps she wanted to symbolize the dress workers. Perhaps she wanted to show that she was in New York at the time she created the painting, but wasn't a part of this New York world, because ultimately she returned to Mexico. Whatever the reason, Frida's inclusion of the Tehuana style of dress does mark a shift in her persona, because it's in 1937 that she begins to use this style of dress within her paintings and as her primary form of fashion, making it the fashion item most associated with Frida Kahlo. Now, many have suggested that Frida wore this style of dress to please Diego, but photos discovered in 2004 revealed that this style of dress runs in her family, as seen here in Frida's photo marked with her mother's name and the year 1890, and the blue ink mark circling her mother's face. Frida, like her mother, ultimately adopted the long pleated skirts with the matching top and adornment with jewelry and flowers in her hair. We can also see Frida's mother's strong gaze. Now, wearing this outfit, Frida took on the attributes of the Tehuana women: strong, elegant, economically independent, and beautiful. But ever since her breakthrough paintings in Detroit in 1932, Frida didn't shy away from exposing her vulnerability, her emotional and her physical pain. And so what we see is that she ultimately conveyed the complexity of human emotions, of her own lived experiences. And so here we can see the Tehuana dress used in this painting called Remembrance of an Open Wound, right? Showing both her strength, but also, right, her physical and her emotional pain. But ultimately, Frida, in wearing the Tehuana style, is also connecting herself to her maternal ancestry. And so the child and the young woman who learned from her father how to pose for the camera and to create various personas ultimately drew upon her mother's style of dress as a Tehuana growing up in Oaxaca, and her mother's persona as a soldadera to create the persona of a politically engaged, strong, and beautiful Mexican woman, an artist who supported the indigenous people in Mexico, people who suffered prior to the revolution and even afterwards. Kahlo's wounds are personal, but they can also be interpreted as the wounds of the indigenous or the wounds of a colonized Mexico. In the end, Frida embraced hybridity, which allowed her to borrow elements from various sources, some from her father, some from her mother, some from the Mexican Revolution, some from 19th century popular style of paintings, some from Catholic imagery and retablos, some from the Aztecs. And she was able to recombine these elements into her own style. And whether she was posing for a photographer or painting her own image onto metal or canvas, she typically emphasized her strength, beauty, pain, androgyny, and deep connection to her Mexican roots, an expression of Mexicanidad. Thank you.
Celia, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you.
That was incredible. You brought a new or an expanded version, I think, of what we know of her and why we love her. And I'm excited to watch your talk again to sort of take from it what I missed because I was so engrossed in the beautiful images. We see new images here that we don't have in the exhibition. There were a few, and Melanie Groves, who you see now on camera, my colleague from the Frick, will tell you how those sort of interweave with what we have and also what you showed that we do have. We're getting a couple, thank you, that was amazing, someone said. Seems like history repeats itself. Loved it. Well, thank you for your comments, and please continue to put them in the chat. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a bit of a Q&A with Celia. So think of your questions. The talk will be available as a recording. There was so much to learn from it. That's right. Thank you again. So Melanie and I are going to ask you a few questions, and then we'd like to open it up to the rest of our audience here. Do you need to get water or anything, Celia? You did a great job.
Thank you. I will take a sip.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask you, why do you think it was important, or it is important, to focus on the impact of place when thinking about Frida Kahlo's formative years as a person and an artist?
Yeah, well, it struck me at one point that we think a lot about Frida, of course, as an artist who's so much connected to her Mexican roots, right? Understandably.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is front and center, and it's so important. But what I started to realize was that a lot happened for her while she was living in the United States. And while it wasn't always a pleasant experience for her, right? She often, talked about how she hated aspects of what she called Gringolandia. She didn't understand, the gringos. But at the same time, right, it's having this impact on her. And I think sometimes we might think, well, if you didn't have a good experience, then maybe we should just push that aside and not really think about it in too much detail, because if you didn't really like it, then why is it that important? But, whenever we go outside of our comfort zones, I'm sure most of us can relate to this, right? When we go outside of our comfort zone, we are challenged in different ways and at different levels. So it depends on how far outside of our comfort zone we go. We might just leave our home and go out into the city where we live, or the town where we live, but we might travel to another place in the country where we live, or go outside the country, right? And so it really depends on where you go. But I think for Frida, being in the United States, a place that she was very curious about from a relatively young age, and which she felt ambivalent about even before she came, I think that while she had all of the ingredients inside of her to be a great artist, while she's here experiencing all of these intense things, racial discrimination, tension in terms of race, the races and ethnicities of this country, problems because of the economic depression, seeing people starving in line waiting for food, while she and her husband are hobnobbing with the rich, where there's all kinds of food and alcohol and whatever you want. Those disparities really bothered her. And then when she's in Detroit and she has this life-threatening miscarriage, and she really reaches rock bottom, she's in a place that she really cannot stand, and where she's away from her family. And what happens, I think, is there's almost like this combustible energy that takes place, right? So yes, within her, she has the ingredients of becoming a great artist, but now being in this place that she's really being challenged on many levels, something happens, and out come these paintings like Henry Ford Hospital that really changed the trajectory of her art. And as I touched on in the talk, she will come back to this. She will not shy away from exposing herself emotionally or physically. So I think that I felt that in order for us to really understand more fully why Frida Kahlo should be considered an important or even a great artist, we needed to understand this formative period much more so than we did.
Thank you for that. And I think we often see, we talk about it, the Frida with a capital F, when she becomes this pop icon. But I think throughout her life, as you laid out, she's sort of primed to be willing to be vulnerable. But she steps into this like deep discomfort and pain and is totally exposed when she's in America. And like you said, when you're in discomfort, create like something creative and new can come out of that. And I think you laid that out perfectly. And we see that for sure. So thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Mel, did you have a question?
I do have a question. It comes from the book, and I guess for those who haven't read the book, Celia is one of the only, or at least the first that I've encountered, scholars who really interprets Frida Kahlo's infertility and the losses of pregnancy in a slightly different way that I connected with as a woman and as a sort of as a mother myself. Instead of, I guess, the popular idea has been that Frida just longed desperately to have a baby. But in your book, you kind of say that she was maybe more ambivalent. And I wondered if you could elaborate on that. That was also a question that came up during our member session. So I know that people would be interested to hear.
Yeah, and the reason that I'm putting that forward is it's not my opinion. It's based on looking really closely at the letters that Frida wrote, particularly to Dr. Eloesser, her doctor, but also her confidant, and then also at her actions and at some of the imagery that she creates. And what you see when you're looking really closely at what she's written is you have a woman who was when she's pregnant, she has a lot of fears. You know, she'd been through this horrible but bus accident where she nearly lost her life at age 18, and it left her with physical pain, problems with her spine. She had a history of spina bifida, polio, and also her father who had epilepsy. These were all things that concerned her, both in terms of passing it on to a child, but also in terms of being able to withstand going through the birth process. And so what you see in the letters is that she's really going back and forth when she's in Detroit. You know, what should I do? And she, finally says at one point, okay, I think I should have an abortion. I don't want to, basically she's saying, I don't want to die. And so then she asks this Dr. Eloesser, can you please write to the doctor in Detroit, Dr. Pratt, who Dr. Eloesser knew, and tell him I need this abortion. Well, the Dr. Pratt, it basically says that he'll give her quinine and castor oil to induce a miscarriage, but he would not perform a surgical abortion, which was illegal at the time, unless, in cases where the mother's life was at risk. Well, Frida thought her life was at risk, but anyway, she does the, castor oil and she tries it and she thinks she miscarries, but she didn't. Well, now she doesn't know what to do again. But ultimately, in writing to Dr. Eloesser, she says, I kind of realized that I'm gonna go through with it. Okay, I think I can do it. It's gonna be fine. But then ultimately, she's told you need to have bed rest and take good care of yourself. And she doesn't. She's going out and she's moving around. And so then she ultimately has a miscarriage and is, life-threatening. I mean, she's just hemorrhaging for, at least 2 days. So I tried to just look at all the facts I could find and to really piece it all together to try and really understand what she was going through. Because constantly for me, what I was trying to do with this book was to understand what was Frida feeling, what was she experiencing? And that's not an easy thing to always figure out. But I did my best, and I really wanted to, as fairly as I could, sort of, show all these different aspects. And so, yeah, I think ultimately she had all of these, ambivalent feelings, which I think are understandable given all of the circumstances of her life at that time. But ultimately it also led to, again, this great breakthrough for her creatively. And one of the things I say in the book is that with that painting, Henry Ford Hospital, the original title had in parentheses, "The Lost Desire," indicating that she no longer had a desire, perhaps, to have children. And so, there's a lot there. It's complicated. And I don't ever want to present it as something that's one-dimensional or simple. But yes, I tried as best as I could to really delve into that.
Thank you. Thank you for talking about that.
Yeah, thank
Sure.
you. We do have a few questions in our Q&A and chat. I'm gonna throw out one that's maybe a quick answer, and then we can get to some of the others. Lane asks, in my dress hangs there, the left anchor of the dress appears to be a toilet. Is that true? If so, what is the significance?
Yeah, yes, it is true. It is a toilet. I think, it can be interpreted in different ways. One level is that I think Frida is poking fun at gringos because, saying that it's up on a pedestal. And she's got a trophy on another pedestal. I think it's supposed to be a sports trophy, showing that what do we put up on classical pedestals? Well, we're really into sports, and we're into our modern toilets, which actually was a big deal in the United States beginning in the early 20th century. And it may also even be a reference to the French artist Marcel Duchamp, who came to the United States, to New York specifically, in 1917, and who ended up exhibiting a very famous work of art called Fountain, where he took a men's urinal, he turned it upside down, he changed the title, called it Fountain, and proclaimed it to be art. And so it's possible she's also thinking about that. I don't know for sure if she knew about that piece at that moment, but later she does go to Paris in 1939, where she meets Marcel Duchamp, and he's one of the few French artists that she really liked. So.
I love that detail, by the way, and I love that someone asked about it. So thank you, Lane, for that. In our chat here, we have someone asking, I'm curious about Frida Kahlo's take on her German roots. Did her father consider himself to be an expatriate German, or did he fully embrace a Mexican identity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I can say one way or another how he exactly viewed himself. I guess if I was going to take everything I know and make an educated guess, yes, I would say he never left his German roots. However, he also very much tried to become a part of Mexican culture, but he never left those German roots. He loved German philosophy. Schopenhauer was his favorite philosopher. So I would say that there's this combination within him. But Frida certainly, when she was younger, she very much identified with her father, and you see her actually taking on aspects of the German more than the indigenous. And even her name, okay, Frida, she adds the E to Frida to make it German, but then later takes it out. So she's trying on, again, these different aspects of her persona. And so there's more of an identification with her father, but by the time you get to, the late 20s, 28, 29, she's starting to leave the emphasis on the German behind much more. And there's this quote where she says even that she didn't like her father's complexion. And where she's really taking on much more, again, her mother's side, her maternal side, the mestiza in her, and also even the Tehuana, as I showed. So it's an important question, and it's one I could go on for a lot longer with, which I know we don't have time for. No. but I do try to grapple with it a little bit in my book, you know, in terms of showing this connection with her father, and then also this shift in her that happens where she's taking on more the maternal roots.
Mhm. That was a good educated guess, I say. That was- I just want to be mindful of time. We have 3 minutes until we're to be done. However, Celia is okay taking a few more questions. So if you haven't submitted a question and you have one, why don't you, anyone who's interested, you can put it in the chat, and I'm happy to pass them along to Celia. Maybe if she would be able to give us some answers. We want to answer for as many of you as we can. So, but I'm going to read the ones that we currently have. I will quickly answer this one, or actually Melanie and I can. Well, actually, Celia, you could. I've heard that Diego visited Falling Water as a guest. Did Frida as well? If so, do any impressions of that visit exist? We've actually discussed this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can go ahead, Celia. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, she did visit Falling Water, and had a kind of an interesting, you know, experience there, with various men that she's trying to seduce. And so yeah, I mean, that's definitely, I think, an important experience she has in 1938 when she comes back to the United States for her first one-person exhibition at the Julian Levy Gallery. And Levy's one of the men who is present at the
visit.
Yeah. Right. So if you want to continue, go ahead.
Oh no, that's what I think what we knew. Mel, do you want to say anything about that?
I guess if we're continuing the story, yes, I guess it was it Edgar Kaufman Sr. who was the other man, and the incident that evening where they were sort of waiting it out on the staircase, I think, to see who could stay up late enough to have an evening with Frida, and Julian Levy was, of course, the winner of that that escapade, I guess. But there is a photograph of Falling Water that we've heard of that is on view at the Blue House, which is now the Museo Frida Kahlo.
Right. And also, I guess I would just add that Kaufman ends up being a good, important patron for buying her art. So. Yes.
Good question. Good question. I'm just going to read this quick comment. Someone says, I think only now can we as modern women see Frida for how complex of an artist she was. I would say yes to that. In her portrait standing with Diego, she seems to make herself physically smaller relative to him than she really is. How does that fit with the power indication of her placing her hand on top of his, and then the message ends? Shoulder? Where?
Well, I think, you know, she was a lot smaller than he was. I mean, she was quite petite.
Yeah.
You know, she was quite petite. She was, you know, like what, 5'3", and you know, I think barely, not even quite 100 pounds. And he was over 6 feet tall. He was like 300 pounds. So she was quite a bit smaller than he was. And so I don't know. I don't see her as making herself that much. I don't see that exactly, that she's making herself so much smaller than he is. What she is doing, though, what I see anyway, and everybody sees something different, but what I do see is that her feet are tiny, and she's like up on tippy toe, which is exact opposite of him. He's got these big worker boots and he's flat-footed, he's grounded, and she's up on tippy toe. And so I think for me, the way that I see it and how I interpret it in the book is that there's something about her in that painting of more the ethereal, that she's more like the look on her face is sort of like she's looking off. She doesn't have that outwardly directed, strong gaze. I think there's something a little bit more there of like Frida, the artist who is in this kind of creative realm, this spiritual realm, not fully grounded in this world. And so I think that accounts in part for the difference between her and Diego, who's very grounded in this world. And also, I think that she shows herself as much more connected to Mexico, and he's more connected at that moment to the United States, to San Francisco, the way he's grounded. So I think there are these important differences there, but I don't necessarily see it as her making herself so much smaller than him. But again, other people see different things, so I allow for different, certainly, interpretations.
It's the physical difference in their size is become part of their legend, right?
Right.
The elephant and the dove,
Right.
And it's literal and figurative. Their size they're matched, and she's such a big personality, and so
Right.
yeah. I'm gonna apologize ahead of time for those who we have a couple questions we won't be able to get to, but thank you for your questions. I'm gonna ask two more if that's okay, so that we can wrap up and honor everyone's time, honor Celia's time and Nick's time as well. Someone has asked in the chat, you addressed Frida's androgyny. How do her relationships with women affect her art?
I think, well, it's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I deal with in the book is her relationship with Georgia O'Keeffe. And, she writes about having an affair with Georgia O'Keeffe. And I think that this relationship was really important for Frida in the sense that Georgia O'Keeffe was a huge phenomenon. I mean, if there's any one female artist you could choose in that period, and even in some ways today, who is the most well-known, the most famous, the most powerful, it would be Georgia O'Keeffe.
Mm-hmm.
And here's Frida at this moment when she is a budding artist. She's really, she's not well known at all. And she encounters Georgia O'Keeffe. She's attracted to her. They both had this interest in androgyny. Georgia O'Keeffe is very much known for her images, right? Photographic images and dressing in this androgynous fashion. But at the same time, the way that O'Keeffe was promoted by her husband, Alfred Stieglitz, was all about her sexuality, and Georgia O'Keeffe hated this. So Frida Kahlo is like coming into contact with these complex issues going on with Georgia O'Keeffe, with her art career, with her relationship with Stieglitz. And I think that that relationship does have an impact on some of the art that she creates in terms of starting to incorporate flowers. In Self-Portrait on the Borderline, she incorporates flowers, and one in particular is the Jack in the Pulpit. Well, that's iconic for Georgia O'Keeffe, and it's been sexualized by Stieglitz, saying that her images of flowers represent her sexuality. Well, now Frida's incorporating that into this painting. The Jack in the Pulpit is indigenous to North America. It's not really found in Mexico, but she puts it on the Mexico side. So I think that's a subtle reference to Frida's sexuality, and in specifically in relationship to Georgia O'Keeffe. But of course, again, if I had more time, I mean, you could probably see other things as well, especially later on in her work. As she will create more and more images of flowers. And she creates an image of two women in the forest, showing two women who are, one's lying in the other woman's lap and they're nude. And so that's a very obvious, representation of two women enjoying each other, physically.
Yes. Thank you for that question. And thank you for your answer. And also, Celia will be here with us till midnight for anyone interested. No. Just kidding. I know, I feel like we could talk and talk. I have so many questions for you, but I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we will say thank you and good night. Did Frida in her writings explore or speak to the symbolism in her art? And would you be able to expand on the idea of duality of which you speak in her book?
Oh, that is a huge question.
That's a good one, right?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's a good one.
You want me to
Yeah,
read it again for you?
no, I think I have it.
Okay.
You know, she in her journal that she starts later, not in the period that I'm working on, but in the 1940s, she does start a journal, and she does write a lot in there about different symbols, what different colors mean to her.
Yes.
And we can see some of the interest in some of these symbols even earlier, like the third eye, for example. Her interest in Hindu imagery, her interest in the yin yang symbol. You know, so there's certain things that we can see earlier that then she writes about later. So
Yes.
that is you know, helpful. Also, she was really well read, and we can look at some of the books that she had in her library, and some of the things that she would have known about, what she would have read about. And then also, like, some of the things that she, you know, that she might mention in letters. But it's not like, you know, and this is true of most artists, it's not like you can go to a journal, a book, a letter, or letters, and they have it all written out for you.
Right.
It's, you know, it would make it so much easier for art historians if they did, but they don't usually do that. So it really involves a lot of painstaking work, finding little, you know, clues and hints, and you know, pulling from this area or that area, and then trying to bring it all together to understand the work of art in a fuller context. For me, it's really important to understand the context in which an artist created a work of art. I'm not saying it's everything, but I think it's important. I'm always curious to know, you know, well, what was going on in that time period when they created that work of art? Why might they have chosen that particular symbol? You know, what was going on? What was going on in their lives, politically, socially, right, etc. And so a lot of what I wanted to do also with these paintings of Frida's from this period when she's in the United States was to give them a context. Because when I teach, I want to know that context, but I didn't know the context for a lot of these works of art, or at least I didn't do much about the context. So so that, you know, became really important to me. And now I am forgetting the very last part of that question.
I will tell you,
which was
momentarily. Can you expand on the duality,
duality.
of which you speak in your book?
Right, right. Yeah. Oh, duality was central for Frida. It was central, as I mentioned briefly, for the Aztecs. It's also very much bound up in this concept of androgyny that I explore in the book. Androgyny, as it comes out of particularly the 19th century, in a lot of the symbolist artists and writers that Frida read, they thought of androgyny as this balancing of male and female. And then that, I think, carries over for her into the Aztec notions of duality. The Aztecs built their whole cosmology around duality. And even their creator god, Ometeotl, is understood as essentially having both male and female aspects. And some people refer to Ometeotl as a bisexual creator deity, god. So I think that for her, it was important on lots of different levels, but certainly it grounded her again in her the Mexican culture prior to the you know, colonial impact of course, Spain, France, Germany, the United States, right? This pre-colonial period. So yeah, duality is very significant for Frida.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I feel that we could go on and it would be a delight. But I want to thank you, Celia, for grounding us in Frida, and for really bringing her to life in a new way and a meaningful way. I think Melanie and I have been living with this show, Melanie more so, for a while. And it feels like I woke up again. I feel a little bit like I've woken up again. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you. You're now part of our family, and you are welcome to come when it's safe. And maybe we can do another conversation with you. We would love that.
Yeah. That would
all
be great. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And again, if anyone has any questions, I'll be in touch with Celia. So you're welcome to, I will put my email address in the chat, and you can message me. And I want to thank Nick, our ASL interpreter, and I want to thank my lovely colleague, Melanie Groves, the curator of this exhibition. We invite you to come and be with us anytime you feel safe to do so. So everyone have a lovely night, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you so much, Celia.